couple people turn your cameras on. That would be awesome. So tell me what would be best for you in terms of spending time. I did say I would go through the buyer document, unless nobody really wants me to go through the buyer document and there's a different document you want me to spend time on that's buyer related. So you tell me.
I like the idea of going through the purchase agreement. I mean, as many times as I've been through this, I always get stuck on dates. And,
okay.
You know, what is there a formula? I mean, I've done it many times, but it just seems like, what are the tricks to making this efficient? And that's what I'd like to know.
Got it. So, so yeah, purchase agreement, we can kind of work through that as well. What else? Thank you, John, for having your camera on. Now I can talk to a human.
Guess I'm the only one, huh?
Are the rest of you in the shower? I don't understand.
I don't know. I'm having a good hair day, so I figured I'd give it a shot.
Exactly right? You might as well just pop that out there. It looked like Stephen was going to come on, but then...
I haven't had a haircut in 4 months. So I am not, and the color is a disaster because I did it myself. So I am not showing my face.
And we love you anyway, regardless of what your hair looks like.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, so so let's do this. Let's anybody else want to put something on the table to run through? Because again, I'm happy to do what makes sense for you guys. If it's a matter of purchase agreement and some date conversations, we can spend some time on that. Did anyone tune in specifically because I said I would go through the buyer agreement?
Actually, purchase agreement would be helpful.
Okay.
Dates are big for me too.
And the buyer, yeah, you can go through that as well, for sure.
Okay, so let's start with the purchase agreement and just kind of run through. Oh, this Jody Boxer's on with us.
So Rick, my question is that, you know, I am finding that when I'm starting to do paperwork when I'm doing paperwork for somebody who wants to submit an offer, to go through the rep agreements and to go, I was curious to know about working this through DocuSign, because I'm kind of finding that every time I need to write up an agreement, it takes about an hour to just get through how to do it through DocuSign. And I'm not that unfamiliar with it anymore. I think I'm sort of pretty good at it, but it's just taking, every time I need to submit an offer, it takes forever.
Yeah, I'll read you what came back from the MCAs from my email this morning, because I think that will answer the questions. I think you might get some questions as to why the forms are not, why they are not in our DocuSign library and they're in Command only. Is that the question?
I'm actually, well, I go into DocuSign from Command. I pull up the contact. I move them into an opportunity into DocuSign. I'm okay working DocuSign and pulling up the documents. That's how I do it, and it's easy to pull the documents. I'm just finding that by the time it transfers over, but you have the contact in Command. By the time you put it in, by the time you write up the offer, and also if you have to make any corrections once anybody's signed, then you have to start at the beginning again. That's what I'm not.
It's a whole lengthy process. It's too lengthy.
Yeah, got it. And so unfortunately, that's kind of above my pay grade. I don't have an answer for that. I know that the Command DocuSign integration and the functionality of DocuSign is something that is continually being worked on to allow for smoother transaction use. But I don't have any additional information on that. I saw something from Steve Gendel the other day indicating that he's working at the regional level. He's working directly with DocuSign as well to smooth out some of these bumps and to streamline the process. I think what DocuSign is working on is some version of this that functions more like .loop did versus what DocuSign actually is, right? To cut out some of those steps. Because my understanding is that there's like just 77 different steps. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So I know the answer I can give you is that literally yesterday on our OP call, Steve Gindel, who is our regional technology coordinator, spoke to that, and that he is working directly right now with DocuSign, as well as KW working directly with DocuSign to say, look, your product is wonderful. This is what we came from. This is the struggle people are having because there's too many steps for you and there weren't that many steps over here. How can you remove some of the stuff to make it flow better? So
Okay, that's fine. So I'll let you do your thing with whatever anybody else needs. I will tune in, but while I'm listening to this, I have to put in another offer on something. So I will be working through that and hopefully get that offer written up before
there you go. See, you might as well get started, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So-
I think the main issue, Rick, just to add to that, is that you put in as much information as possible in command, but then most of it does not auto feed into DocuSign. So if that connection can be made, that's where we'd really gain efficiencies.
Yeah, and so that's the command DocuSign integration piece. There's two things that we're talking about here. There's the command DocuSign integration piece. And that's being worked on to say, well, if we did it once here, why do we have to do it again over here to streamline that? And then the secondary piece is what I just talked about, which is altering DocuSign, the product itself, to go from what it is to what we're more used to. And the good news is that when there's 180,000 people all saying, wait a minute, this is harder than what we used to have. They pay attention, right? Because there's power in numbers. So, and then I think the last piece I'll mention is that if you live inside of the Ridgefield Market Center, there is some version of a hiccup in actually having the buyer side documents show up in DocuSign, in the DocuSign library. They're in command and have to be, but they're not necessarily in the DocuSign library. So that's being worked on as well. So.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
as
my-
far as when all that's going to happen, the answer is, I don't know the answer to that. Sorry, Joanne, go ahead.
No, I think my biggest thing is one, like someone said, having all the information done, having the documents in format, so we don't have to bring it in from our computers as a PDF and then a whole lot more changes. So the KW471, the Smart MLS forms, and the CAR forms, they're just kind of like all over the place.
Yep, all being worked on.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And unfortunately, that's the best answer I can give on all of that.
That's good enough.
All right.
So can I make a quick comment, Rick?
Yeah, of course.
So for any documents like that you can't find in the KW 471 or Smart MLS section where in the drop-down box for DocuSign forms, if you know it's a form that you're gonna like always be using, there's a section in DocuSign called My Docs where you can save those to and then just transfer them there to whatever active room you want it to be. So you could just copy it from that My Docs room where it stays forever into any active room that you want it to be added to. So instead of going to find it on your computer somewhere else, anywhere, it's just in DocuSign already.
Can we make that, Chris, can we turn that into a form on our end? If we just make out?
I don't believe so. No, it's just saving the PDF and then you would have to like drag and drop like initials
Yeah,
to where
just
they
like
need to go, etc.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, I don't know if it's possible, but I don't, that's above my pay grade, like Rick said.
Hey, every little bit helps.
There's some version of a shortcut, right? So thank you, Chris, for that. All right, guys, which one do you want to start with? You want to start with dates on your purchase agreement or the buyer doc? Where do you want to go?
Dates.
All right, Joanne's the one who answered, so we'll dive in with some dates. And so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to open an offer to purchase. And then I'm going to go through the offer to purchase and then go quickly through the purchase agreement because we've got 2 market centers worth of people here. And depending on who you are more used to one document than the other. If you work more in Northern Fairfield County, you are used to a certain document. And if you work almost anywhere else, you are used to a certain different document. And let's see where I'm going to open this from. So let me share my screen with you. All right. So here's your offer to purchase form, which for some of you doesn't look familiar, but it's actually almost the same exact form as the purchase agreement. It just looks a little different. There's a couple of main differences, which I'll point out to you. I'm going to run through this document quickly so that you guys have an idea of what we're talking about when you guys say, help me with the dates. I want you to get specific and tell me exactly where you struggle. We'll run through that, and then I'll open the MLS and bring up the purchase agreement so you can see how the two forms are nearly identical. They just look a little different. So clearly at the top of this form, you've got buyers and sellers and addresses, MLS numbers, and the date, and then the inclusions, right? Any issues with how you're filling that part out?
No.
No.
Okay, good. And so then the next piece is the math. Anyone struggling with the math here, right?
No.
So there's 5 different lines for the math. You start with your initial deposit, and then the balance of the deposit, which is the contract money, mortgage money, and then the remainder to be brought at closing, right? And that top line is the actual offer number. So the bottom 4 lines, when you finish, have to actually add up to the top first line.
Rick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
just to back up a second, if I can. I can't find this form in DocuSign when I go into the KW 471. I only have 12 documents. I would imagine there are probably more, but just quickly, do you know how I can get this document into DocuSign?
I don't know the answer to that. If you would do me a favor and ask Deb Linke that question.
Sure, will do.
She can either answer as to where it is, or if it's not where it's supposed to be, move it to where it needs to be.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
unfortunately, I'm not your DocuSign guy, so
No
I
worries.
just don't know the answers to those questions. All right, so
Plus the document is different for Stanford.
say that again, Steve.
The document is different for Stanford.
Yes, it's different and the same all at the same time. Again, all the information is
It looks
basically the same, but it looks different than the actual purchase agreement, which is why I'm going to run through this one, because I have this one fast and ready on my in my email. I don't yet have the purchase agreement there. So
Rick,
yeah,
this is Jackie. I want to ask you a question. I'm just doing my first buyer, so I don't know all this. The offer to purchase, did you present it before the purchase agreement? What is the order?
so no. So the offer to purchase. All right. So this is where mixing 2 market centers together gets confusing, and I get it, but understand that the offer to purchase and the purchase agreement are the same document. They're the same document. If you do business in Northern Fairfield County, most people use the form that you're seeing on your screen, which is the offer to purchase. If you do business in Southern Fairfield County along the coast, mostly you're seeing the purchase agreement, which comes directly from the MLS. If you do business in the rest of the state, you're mostly seeing that 3 or 4 page full contract, right? So depending on geography will ultimately dictate the document that you're using. It's not that you give one and then the other. It's one or the other, depending on your geography. Does that help, Jackie?
Yes, it helps. And one more question.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the top part says MLS number and this slash, yeah, I understand, as listed in the, what comes in there? What was
Smart. So the MLS number is the listing number as listed in the Smart MLS.
it? Smart, okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're just going to name the MLS.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joanne, you said that dates were also of concern for you in this document. And so tell me exactly what dates you're looking to discuss. And then we're going to flip over into the purchase agreement and run through that one as well.
Sure. So like, for instance, the additional deposit to be paid on or before. You know, from the date we're signing the contract, because of course we have inspections and all, date that goes there. You know, I know typical closing, we would do anywhere from 45 to 60 days out. You know, those kind of dates. Typical for the inspection, 10 to 14 days. I just get a little muddy with some of them.
Okay, great. So let's run through those, right? So first, let's start with, because it comes first in the document, right? Let's start with the mortgage contingency date. Right, so the mortgage contingency date, regardless of which form you're using, there's a mortgage contingency date. And so the question becomes, well, how do I figure out what to put there? I would encourage you with a mortgage contingency date to first and foremost, talk with the loan officer. Don't just put something in without getting guidance from the loan officer. Because depending on how busy everything is, depending on the loan program that a certain buyer may be applying for, those dates may change. So if the loan officer says you're solid to have an initial approval to waive the contingency date within 30 days, well then great. If they need 40 days or 45 days, well then you know that. If 3 weeks makes sense, then you know that. So I would start with having a conversation with the loan officer. Whatever date they come up with, I would insert it into whatever date they come up with. I might add a week, just cause, right? You want to make sure that they're not being overly optimistic. If it's someone you know real well and can trust the information, then use that information. If it's someone you don't know, I might add a week just to put a little cushion in there, right? And how you write that in there, I encourage you to write it this way. Don't look at 45 or, so what's 30 days from now? 30 days from now would be like July 15th, right? I wouldn't put in an actual date. For me, I would put in a little asterisk if you don't have room to write this and stick it someplace else on the form, that the mortgage contingency date is 30 days from a fully executed offer to purchase, or 30 days from a fully executed purchase agreement. Because remember, you could write this up today and present the offer, and depending on what's going on, if there's multiple offers, if someone's away on a cruise or whatever, you maybe don't have an answer today or even tomorrow. Maybe it takes you until Friday to finally have the answer. And so you don't want to waste half a week to a week with a mortgage contingency date that now everyone has to struggle to hit. And you also don't really want to rewrite with new dates after your acceptance. So I think by keeping a firm date out of that and going more with 30 days from fully executed purchase agreement or offer to purchase, or 45 days from, gives you more flexibility. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's perfect.
Oh, see that? Karen likes that idea too.
I love that. The pressure's off. Thank you.
But I just want to comment on that though, as somebody who does a lot on the listing side. 30 days from a signed contract leaves us sort of 45 days out, which is a really long time, especially if you're in a multiple offer situation.
Well, I agree. And so I didn't say contract, I said purchase agreement or offer to purchase.
Got
Right?
it. Sorry.
So that tightens it a little bit more.
Got it.
And I think that, but Jody makes a valid point, is that you have to balance your dates, right? If someone's looking for a fast close and their mortgage contingency is the day before they're supposed to close, well, the listing agent and the sellers are going to look at that and say, okay, can we tighten this up a little bit, right? And so that's when you need to go back to Karen and say, okay, look, so is it possible to get a preliminary approval in 21 days based on what we already know, so that we can pull this back a little bit, right? So then it might be 21 days from a fully executed purchase agreement or offer to purchase. Jody's point about saying 30 or any period of time from the executed contract is that you're building in almost 2 weeks to get to a contract. And so now you're like, you might as well have people not unpack their suitcases because it's just too far out, right? So make sure that when you're writing this up, you're using it as the date that the seller signs the offer to purchase or the purchase agreement, so that the clock starts ticking immediately right then and there, and you're working with your loan officer or lender to balance out what they need.
Hey,
Does
Rick,
that make better sense? Yes, Lori.
I just think, don't forget going into multiple offer to ask the questions and don't make assumptions. Are there any terms that the seller is looking for that would be more favorable to them? Because we're all in a rush to close, but the sellers may not be. They may want a little, I just like write the offer based on what the seller wants to increase your chances of getting it.
Yeah,
If you can do it.
100%, right? And so we're starting out asking all those questions first of the seller. Are there terms that are specific to the sellers that we should know about, right? And then build things around that, right? And if you're not in a multiple offer situation, you can take these conversations that we're having today as kind of the here's the norm. But the norm really should be asking the question and then building it around them. Great point. Inspection dates, Joanne. So Joanne, good on mortgage contingency date?
Yes, and Lori's tip is very helpful. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about the inspection date since we're focused on dates. The inspection date, again, I think there's the typical, and then there's the what happens if you're in a scenario or a market like we're in today, right? So typical would be that inspections are done within 7 calendar days, right? Within that first week, you're looking to have the inspections done. Anything longer than that, listing agents are going to come back to you and say, okay, really, why do you need 2 weeks to get an inspection done? Because the answer is you don't. Right? You need probably 48 to 72 hours to really get an inspection done. And so the idea of giving people up to a week maybe builds in if you have to get to a weekend, if there's work issues, if there's whatever, right? If there's some scheduling issues.
But I have to say the inspectors are not available now. Like everybody's swamped. So we're going through a lot of things now where we can't even get an inspector till next week.
I'm getting that same thing.
I found that too. It was hard.
Yeah, and so if you know that there are special circumstances, right? You may need to write in there within 7 calendar days with a little star that says, unless we can't get somebody, right? And then it may need to be 10 days. Here's the thing I don't want you to fall victim to though. I don't want you to start writing offers with all of these dates bloated, right? Because then you put yourself at risk of not looking like great buyers, right? And so in an environment like this, you've got to stay tight. And then, so maybe you make the offer with some tight dates, and then you have the conversation with the listing agent to say, look, we're going to do everything we can possibly do to have this inspection done in the next 3 to 5 days. However, as I'm sure you've experienced, there's a shortage on inspectors right now, right? And so we're going to get literally the next available appointment, and I will let you know by later today what that appointment is. The other thing that I might start doing, this really comes from our discussion about how to win multiple offers. But when you start pre-booking things, if there really is a shortage of inspectors and you're working with a buyer who's hot to trot, and you work with an inspector all the time, you know that this weekend's you're going to be writing something up for somebody. Call them today and say, hey, you know what? Could I book an inspection with you at noon next Tuesday? Great. What's the property address? Don't know yet. I'll have that for you over the weekend. But I'd like you to leave that spot open for me because I know I'm going to be selling something. And then when you write the offer up on Saturday or Sunday, you can literally have that written in and/or have the conversation with the listing agent. Look, we foresaw this issue, and so we already have our inspection scheduled for Tuesday at noon. Nobody else is going to be able to get in here for another week to week and a half. So it's another reason why you should choose us. Make sense?
Yes.
But generally speaking, in a non-crazy time, 7 days is that inspection number for the most part, right? There's another little date inside of the paragraph after the inspections. And basically what that date is, when are we going to get the reports and have a conversation around what we're looking for? I always used to put in 3 additional days, like once, and that means once everything is back, the conversation will happen within 3 days. Anybody doing anything different nowadays with that? Well, that's still relatively normal.
Pretty normal.
Okay, good. And then, of course, towards the bottom, you have your contract date, right? If your inspections are 7 days, contracts are usually the week after, so 7 and 14. Typical, normal, unless you're fighting, right? If you're fighting tooth and nail for a property, then again, you want to just tighten those dates up, right? The contract of sale, there really isn't a reason, unless you have an attorney who is just completely overloaded, why a seller's attorney can't turn around a contract in a couple of days. They're basically standard contracts, right? And the terms and the names get changed, but they're pretty standard from what comes out of an attorney's office. So if you're fighting, have a conversation with the buyer's attorney up front. Ask them what makes sense, just like you had a conversation with Karen about the mortgage contingency. Talk to the attorney. Sorry, that's wrong attorney. Talk to the listing agent to ask around, hey, how fast can your seller's attorney turn around a contract, because we want to get this in contract as quickly as possible, and see if they'll give you an answer on that and use that date. But generally speaking, we're talking about inspections at 7 and contracts at 14.
The other thing I've noticed people is everybody seems to be, and it's a lot of New York buyers, clicking lead inspections. And when I've had multiple offers, I start questioning them. Well, are you really going to do a lead inspection? Because if they do, then my seller has to disclose it. And they're like, no, I always check everything. And I was like, would you mind? Well, I'm just saying it may be something that sets you apart that you don't want to set you apart from everybody else when you're trying to win.
Yeah, so that's another really great point, right? Because the whole lead thing, I think in my tenure, I had one buyer one time do an actual full-blown lead inspection, right? And so most people are not doing full-blown lead inspections. And if you're just checking everything to reserve the right, Lori's point is maybe you don't want to reserve the right on that one, right? How badly do you want to win the house? Because as a listing agent, Lori's asking that question to see if she can't get that removed, right? So have that conversation and know what the answers are around that.
So Rick, that's 14 days. That's 14 days from the signed purchase agreement.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And most of the dates that you're putting in either this offer to purchase or the purchase agreement, which I can jump to now, just so everyone can see that it's basically the same form in a slightly different, are dates that are from the full execution of that document. Okay, so here's the one from the at least a version from the MLS, right? And so the purchase agreement, it just gets a little wordier up top here versus the offer to purchase. And again, depending on where you live, if you live in if you live and work in Northern Fairfield County, you're typically using the document that was just on the screen. Southern Fairfield County and along the coast, oftentimes the purchase agreement. Anything in between, you might see either one. And so, but the top is still the same. It's sellers and buyers with the listed property, with anything extra, just like what we discussed at the top of the other page, and then any exclusions, right? So the top is the same. This one just looks different, is that there's just more lines than the offer to purchase, right? if it wasn't so important that the board get the offer to purchase form on one page, the offer to purchase might look like this as well, right? But it was to conserve and get it all on one page. This whole piece is basically the same in terms of your 5 lines, right? That's the same idea of the purchase price minus your binder, minus contract money, minus anything you bring to the closing, minus the mortgage money, right? So the difference between the offer to purchase and the purchase agreement of these last 2 lines are switched. On the offer to purchase, the mortgage money is on line 4, and what you bring to the table at closing is on line 5, right? But the idea is the same. What's a little different is how this is written over here, right? The escrow agent, which is just the buyer's agency. So if you're on the buy side, this is almost always Keller Williams Realty. That's the same. The closing date, which on the offer to purchase is a different line down further. The closing date on this document goes here, right? See cash on taking title to premises. So it's what you're bringing to the closing. They just have that closing date here. And then this down here is your mortgage contingency. So it just looks a little different, but the information's exactly the same. And the conversations that we just had regarding the dates are exactly the same.
So what would be the closing date?
Sorry, say that again, Stephen?
What the closing date, what date would that be?
So the closing date is going to be a conversation between a couple of people. First, go back to what Lori's put on the table earlier. First, you're going to ask that question of the listing agent. Is there a specific closing date that the sellers are keen on, right? Oftentimes there's not, but oftentimes there is. And if you know that, and the buyers don't quite care when they close, and you can put the closing date that's specific to the seller's wants and needs in there, it's just one less thing to negotiate. It makes the buyers seem more amenable to the seller's needs. And in a multiple offer situation, it may set you apart, saying, "Oh, but look, this one actually will close by, on July 29th, which is exactly when we need to close. Wow, it must be fate. Let's go with them." Right? I've seen weirder things happen as to why people pick, right, a certain offer. So start with that conversation with the listing agent to see if there's a specific date. And then if there is and the buyers are okay with it, use that. If there's not, and the buyers have certain needs, you can certainly utilize that. I would also be having a conversation with the loan officer or the lender to make sure that the closing date the buyers are looking for fits into when the financing might be available, right? It's great for the buyers to want to put in there, we want to close in 3 weeks, right? And then you bring it to Karen and she's like, okay, well, like, where am I supposed to pull this money out of in 20 days or in 18 days to make sure you can close in 21?
Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't.
Right.
It just depends on the buyer.
Yeah.
But we have done it. We have done it recently.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I see Karen walking around one of the market centers with all this money just shoved in her dress and like in her shoes and like weaved into her hair. On those days, kind of pull that all out and close. But the idea is have that conversation, right? Be in partnership with the other parties who are all pushing this forward, so that you're not putting something down that you have to change a little bit later. And that can be, Stephen, as in a cash scenario, you could close in a week. In a mortgage scenario, you can close in 30 days, sometimes less, sometimes 30 to 45, like depending on the program, depending on the buyers, depending on the time of year, depending on appraisals, right? Depending on a whole lot of things. And so I think that the answer isn't necessarily a 45 days goes in there or 30 days goes in there. It's a conversation with the inside of each transaction and will always be slightly different. Does that help?
Thank you. That does help a great deal, because I was actually plugging in a number like a 45 or 60 day from a
I was doing the same.
purchase sign. Yeah. From the purchase agreement.
Ah, got it. Well, and you can do that as well. I'll tell you, on the listing side, I think people are looking more for kind of choosing a date. right? Because everyone needs to have a conversation with sellers to say this is when they're looking to close. Don't make the listing agent do more math, right? Pop an actual date in there. That's the one time I would say that a date should go in there. Does anybody disagree with that?
No.
Well, I think you need to do it from the accepted offer, because if you give like 30 days from today and you don't get an accepted offer for another week, then we've lost that whole week.
Well, agreed. And see, this is what happens when you're late, Ms. Mulder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we had that conversation as to your mortgage contingency date, making it from the acceptance. But on the closing date, we're gonna look to tighten that and pick an actual date.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. I thought you were talking about contingency.
No worries, no worries. And so this is the MLS form is a little bit weird. So if you notice, this says contingencies. On this form, you're literally writing in what your, like, you know, buyer will do an inspection in certain number of days. There's another version of this form, which I don't have ready to put on my screen for you, which has contingencies, and then it has some boxes as to what you're going to, what inspections you're going to do and any other contingencies, just like the offer to purchase form did, right? It looks more like this in the middle here than you writing it in. So again, there's lots of different versions of this form, and you just have to, if you don't like writing this stuff in, yeah, I have a feeling this says Wallingford on it. I don't think this is the document that we're using every day down south, but it's pretty close. And then, of course, this form, the way that the difference here in this form is this does ask for an acknowledgement that the property condition disclosure form has been received, which I don't think there's an actual, yeah, so it just simply says on here, even though this is now $500, it just says on here that it doesn't make you actually have the buyer make a representation as it does on this form. It talks about warranty deeds, the contract of sale to be signed, so the contract date is at the end on this one. And then the biggest difference to these two forms is this. On this purchase agreement, it says this agreement to remain in full force and effect and constitute a valid contract between the parties unless it's replaced by something that the attorneys write, right? This offer to purchase, you can see, specifically says this is not a contract of sale. Now, depending on who the attorneys are involved, some attorneys don't believe that this actually is a valid contract of sale, although it does say that. So what I would say to you is have the conversation about which document you're using until or unless someone gets different information from their specific attorney. Signing this contract is a contract, and signing this one is likely not. I say likely not only because I did have one time where a buyer sued a seller for specific performance of this contract, even though it specifically said this is not a contract of sale. And the seller had to spend $10,000 to have the buyer go away and not buy their house. Lots of fun, right? Questions, comments, concerns about?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, with regard to inspections, so typically 3 days after we have the inspection, what about the seller's response to us once we go to them with our requests? Is there a rule of thumb for them to get back to us?
So the way I would handle that is you're always having, when you represent a buyer, every single time that you hand a piece of paper or have a conversation with the listing agent, in my opinion, you're asking that next question, right? So if Lori's the listing agent on a property and I'm handing her an offer, I'm going to have a phone conversation with her. I'm not having a text conversation, and I'm not sending it via email hoping she gets it, right? I might send it via email and then pick up my phone and call her and say, hey, I just sent you over an offer via email, wanted to make sure that you got it. while I have you on the phone, could you open it up and just review it? If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them, right? And before I let Lori go, the question I'm going to ask is, right then and there, when do you believe you'll have an answer from the sellers? And so Lori's going to say, you know what, Rick, probably by 7 o'clock tonight. Great. And then at 10 to 7, if I haven't heard from Lori, I'm going to call her again and say, hey, I know we're not quite at 7. I just wanted to see how on time we were for that answer. And then she gets me that answer. We negotiate. We have an accepted offer, right? Whatever is next, I'm going to ask Lori that same question, depending on what's next, right? So now the sellers we have an accepted offer. Now the sellers have to sign. I'm curious, Lori, I just sent over the new purchase agreement or the new offer to purchase. When do you think you might have the seller's signature on that? And Lori will give me another answer to that so I can follow up. Next step is going to be inspections. I'll ask the same thing. So Lori, I just sent you over the buyer's requests from inspections. I'm curious, when do you think you might have a conversation and then an answer from your sellers? I'm going to continually ask that question every step of the way so that the listing agent can tell me what their expectations are, and then I can follow up. Because I've been given an expectation. I can then go back to the buyers and give them that expectation. And if Lori says to me, I asked her when the sellers might respond to the inspection items, and she said, we should certainly have something to you by next Wednesday. Right? Well, then we get to have a further conversation. Say, oh, is there something I don't know? Like, are they backpacking on the Antarctic Peninsula? Like where are they? That we can't have an answer sooner. I'm curious why the prolonged period of time.
Okay, great.
Does that help?
Absolutely.
But it can be prolonged if we're getting estimates for electrical or double checking the septic, so it could be prolonged, but as long as there's communication and you understand what we're doing just to make the decision and understand what the cost is related to the seller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank
right?
you.
Because sometimes stuff happens, right? And when stuff happens, sometimes there is a prolonged period of time. But I think that the mistake we sometimes make on the buyer side is sending something off to a listing agent and not retaining control, right? You want to retain control by asking additional questions. And so, and Lori's going to be asking you the same questions, right? Because she's looking to retain control for her clients. And so when you have two agents who continually ask each other, when can we expect something, you have great communication going on and no one's ever in the dark, right? The worst part of a transaction is when people are sitting around scratching their heads, wondering who's doing what and why aren't we talking to each other, right? So do yourself a favor and make the mistake of over communication if you're going to make any mistake at all.
Right, well, I always have conversation. I've just never asked those questions. So good point.
I would just say, because everybody who knows me knows I'm really crazy about this, but I would check the permits before you write up your report so that you understand what's permitted, what's not. Is the oil tank out of the ground? You're going to be asked up by an inspector if they think there's one in the ground. So that all has to be, you can't after the fact come back and say, I just discovered that we left something out. So just know what you're looking at to protect your buyer.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's always harder to troubleshoot something that's a surprise, right? When you can eliminate as many surprises as humanly possible, everything will go far smoother. And what that really means is not foreseeing the future, but knowing where those trouble points might come up, right? Knowing that someone's going to ask about an oil tank, knowing that someone's going to ask about permits, knowing that someone's going to ask about, a municipal search, all of those kinds of things. When you're prepared for them, there's more time to solve the problem. When that stuff pops up 3 days before the closing, that is just no fun. Like, everyone's in a bad mood.
Okay,
When it pops up 3 weeks before a closing, it's far easier to solve. Sorry, Joanne, go ahead.
That's okay. I have another question.
Yes.
Purchase agreement, offer to purchase, standard form real estate contracts.
Yeah.
I have learned in the past because I would do an offer to purchase, and I've actually lost deals because somebody else went in with the standard form contract.
Yeah.
So I've made it my practice to just put the offers in on that. Is that right or wrong?
So there isn't a right or wrong. And what Lori's talking about is what Joanna's talking about is this, right? So that's your MLS standard form contract. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, right? It basically goes through the same stuff we just went through with a whole lot more detail, right? And because it is an actual contract. Now, most of the state, just so you know, again, we're not going to spend a ton of time on that one, but I wanted to just show you what it looked like. Most of the state outside of Fairfield County only uses that document. Whenever I buy something up in Waterbury and I write it on our offer to purchase form and send it in, the listing agent calls or texts me back and says, "What is this? Like, what are you doing?" Like, oh crap, like I forget. You'd think I've done it enough now that you think I would remember. But it goes on an actual contract form. And when you're doing business outside of the county, that document, there is a 5-day attorney review period built into that document. Let me just show you where that is so you know where it lives. It is right. It is
I think it's in the beginning, Rick. I actually was looking for it yesterday because I wasn't sure if it was actually in that form or not.
Yeah, it's definitely here. I thought, oh, sorry, you're right. It's on page 1. I thought it was in the end. So paragraph 8 is attorney review, right? So there's a 5-day attorney review period built into this because we're not realtors. I mean, we are realtors because we are not. Is it really only Tuesday? Holy crap.
Attorneys.
Because we're not attorneys, right? We're realtors. And so this document is built, has a piece built into it to say, okay, just in case the realtors go to town and change stuff and they don't do it right, the attorneys have 5 days to review it, change it, and if the changes that the attorneys make or any riders that are added to this that the attorneys might do are unacceptable to either party, right? The parties can cancel the contract with no harm, no foul, and the deposit is returned to the buyer, right? So there's a process for attorney review when you're dealing with a contract. It's why some attorneys don't like the purchase agreement, because the purchase agreement says it's a contract but doesn't have any kind of attorney review period built in, right? It's part of why in Northern Fairfield County we utilize the offer to purchase that says we're not attorneys, and the rest of the state uses that other form. That purchase agreement kind of snuck in there. Attorneys don't love it because they're not involved in that typically. Here's the answer to Joanne's question. Is it smart to use that? My answer is it depends. Everyone needs to know. Oh, so before I answer that question, oftentimes when you utilize that document, there isn't a contract drawn up by attorneys. Sometimes they will put a rider on that document. Usually the attorney for the buyers will put a rider on that 4-page standard contract, but the seller's attorney doesn't write up a brand new contract because it's kind of already done. Again, when I buy things in Waterbury, we write that contract. That contract just gets sent to both attorneys. There is nothing else signed. We just utilize that document. So it kind of removes a step, which I guess could be good, could not, depending on the attorney. Here's the answer to, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It really very much depends on your buyer, on the seller that the buyer is making the offer to, on the listing agent who represents the buyer who you're making, or the seller that you're making the offer to, the market conditions. It's all very kind of, it depends-y. I have seen use of those contracts be appealing to a seller and help win the day because they think, well, this person's willing to be married to me right away, right? So it shows that they're a stronger candidate. They're more invested in this transaction. I want to say yes to that. I've seen sellers be scared to death with a contract form. Sometimes that's because they're scared because they don't understand it. Sometimes it's because they have a listing agent who isn't used to seeing that contract and gets freaked out.
Okay.
So it's hard to answer that question, Joanne, because it is so dependent on the parties involved and the scenario, the circumstances.
All right. Well, I appreciate the input. Thank you.
That doesn't mean that I dissuade you from using it. One thing I will say about the documents that one uses, sometimes I get texts saying, Rick, help me out. I'm presenting an offer on this form and the listing agent is insistent that it goes on the other form. And I'm fighting back and forth with him that I can put it on whatever form I want. There's no law that says, guys, if you're on the buyer side and the listing agent asks it on a specific form, there's usually a reason. There's almost no reason to argue that. It just makes you seem like you're like a troublemaker, and it doesn't help the buyer win the day, right? If it's, you may want to ask a question. I'm curious, is there a reason why that form versus this form, right? In just a curiosity manner. But what I've learned over time is if the listing agent says we're only accepting it on this form, put it on that form. Like, who cares? Right? As long as you're explaining to the buyer that this particular seller and or listing agent C requires it to be on this form and you have this attorney 5-day review period, or if you're nervous, we can send this form to your attorney first to make sure, right? You always have another option. Arguing with the listing agent, I don't quite understand why people do that. As a listing agent for most of my career, that to me was like, oh man, if this person is a pain in my ass now, what happens when something really goes wrong, right? And now I'm looking around for, like, is there anybody else bringing an offer? Because that would be so nice not to have to deal with troublemaker over here. Does anybody have another thought on that, or a different thought on that? No? Okay, good. Just want to make sure that I'm not off base, because it's been a while.
Be a good loser.
Say it again.
Be a good loser. I recently had someone curse me out for him not being the top winner. And I thought, you know, if this first one falls apart, I'm not sure I'm going to number 2.
Yeah, that is so true, right? And that's a really good piece of advice. Be a really excited professional winner, but even more importantly, be a really excited professional loser in those circumstances. Right? Remember, as a buyer's agent, your buyers they're not entitled to anything. They're entitled to honesty and fair dealings. And the reality is that sometimes it doesn't feel like they've received that either, right? And sometimes we have to be that buffer. When you're excited with them, the buyers take the loss better than when you decide to villainize the seller or the listing agent. Remember, if all of a sudden 2 days later you get the call that you're now up to the plate because the first one fell apart, and you've spent the last 48 hours villainizing the listing agent or the sellers, what kind of a transaction do you have now? The buyers are like, oh, really? Well, you just spent the last 48 hours telling us how horrible these people were. I'm not sure I even want to buy this house anymore. So be careful, because a lot of real estate agents shoot themselves in the foot with the way they communicate information. So this is supposed to be a forms conversation. Anything else on the forms deal with all 3 of those different versions? Anything else that you struggle with? Anything else that doesn't quite make sense?
That does it for me. Thank you for all the information.
No worries, no worries.
Rick,
Yes, Sonali.
on the purchase agreement,
Yes.
so there is a term and condition for the fourth option, payable the dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
So how we can find that? Because sometimes they get the, if they are putting like a 10% down payment and the rest of the mortgage, maybe, the last minute circumstances that they won't be able to get the full amount of the mortgage and they have to pay the rest in, on the closing table.
So ultimately, when you're writing this document out, you're writing this based on the terms of the offer that is being made, right? And you're writing the offer in good faith. So if you're writing something in good faith at that moment that they're going to put 10% down up front and then 1%, then 9%, and then they're going to bring 10% more to the contract signing table. So now they have a total of 20% down and 80% as a mortgage. If all of a sudden something happens and let's say the property doesn't appraise, right? And so now you're making a small adjustment and they're bringing only 78% in a mortgage and an additional 2% to the closing table. You don't have to rewrite all of that because you in the middle of the transaction. Is Karen still on? Hey, Karen.
I'm here.
So what does the lender look for if in the middle of a transaction, all of a sudden, say that the offer and the contract were written in good faith with 80-10-10, and because of a snafu with the appraisal, it's really now going to be 78% mortgage and an extra 2% is being brought to the table. Does the lender require any an adjustment in the contract with initials, or how easy or hard is that?
I mean, that's an easy thing to do. As long as you're bringing the seller, I don't think the contract needs to be changed as long as you're bringing the seller the same amount of money at the end. I mean, really, it's a lender issue. The lender wants to make sure that you qualify, not so much they don't care what the seller, the contract with the seller. It's a pretty easy thing if we had to change it anyway.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be certain that was not off base on that. So if something changes, Sonali, after the offer is accepted, as long as it was written in good faith up front and everyone's in agreement about what those changes are as they change, typically not an issue, and you're typically not rewriting or re-signing contracts or whatnot. And at the end of the day, as Karen said, the money is the money at the closing table, and that's what everyone really ultimately cares about.
Right. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Perfect. And so Lori put one thing on the table. Since we don't have time to go through the buyer agreement, and and if you need it, I can certainly do another one of these for the buyer agreement. Let's cover in our remaining minutes the escalation clause, simply because if you weren't on the multiple offer session or call that we did a week or two ago, this is one of those things that you should know about, and you should know how to utilize, and also know what issues you might come up with if you use it. So what is that escalation clause? Who knows what the escalation clause actually is? When you're representing a buyer, oftentimes in a multiple offer situation, right? What is it?
You're agreeing to increase the price of the offer by a certain amount, and then there's a cap not to exceed a certain dollar figure. So you could say we'll go $3,000 over the next highest verifiable offer, but not to exceed $800,000. So you basically should be in a win situation as long as the listing agent understands what you're presenting and can present it to her client or his client.
Yeah, and that last part is what we're going to talk about, because that sometimes is the tough part, right? But the escalation clause itself is an opportunity for you to utilize a number that's not an actual number in your offer, right? It allows you to best everybody else, so it's especially helpful in a multiple offer situation where someone comes back and says, any adjustment in price and terms we'd like to have by 5 o'clock today in a sealed whatever, so that we can open them and make a decision. And you go in with My offer is $5,000 over the highest verifiable offer, right? You heard Lori say the word verifiable and you heard me repeat the word verifiable. That's the key piece in there, the highest verifiable offer, which means if they're going to call you on you win, we want $5,000 over, $790. Well, we need to see the offer that was actually for $790. You can redact the name if you want of the buyers, but everything else we need to see that there was actually an offer made for $790,000. And then we're happy to pay you $795, right? There's a cap on it, as Lori said, in that example. If the highest verifiable offer was $796 and the escalation clause said $5,000 over the highest verifiable offer with a cap of $800,000, well, if the highest verifiable offer is $796 and they're willing to show that, well, then our offer is automatically $800,000 because it's $5,000 higher, but with a cap of $800,000. You see how that works? Here are some of the issues that you might come up against. First, know that escalation clauses are 100% legal. Sometimes people say to you when you present it, oh, you can't do that, it's illegal. There has to be a number in there. Well, that's not true, right? Escalation clauses are 100% legal. They may not be known or recognized to some of the listing agents that you're presenting them to, which means some of them may come back to you with, we're not allowed to use them, you can't do that, they're illegal, right? And the answer, of course, is no, they're not. However, if you get a response back from a listing agent that says, the seller is uninterested in addressing the escalation clause and would prefer, if your buyer wants to stay in the game, an actual number, that's the seller's prerogative, right? So as the buyer's agent, you get to say, are you certain? Because I actually feel like the seller could make out better utilizing our escalation clause. And the listing agent can say, yeah, we had this conversation, over and above 6 or 7 times, and they're just uncomfortable with it. They'd like to see a number. Okay, great. I'll go back to the buyers. And then the buyers get to make a choice. Do they want to give an actual number, or do they want to withdraw, right? Because in that scenario, the escalation clause is not going to be honored. A seller still has a right to do that. While we're on it, and then I'll jump back to asking any questions about escalation clauses. I had a question this morning from someone who was asking about a seller who came back and said, we'll accept your offer if you write your loan through this mortgage company. Can the seller do that? Sure they can. Right? The seller has a right to ask for whatever they want. The buyer can say, you know what, I appreciate that. However, we're happy with Karen Mulry. We're going to stick right where we are. Thank you very much. Are you saying that you won't accept our offer with someone else underwriting the loan? Then the seller has a decision to make. If an ultimatum is given by the buyer, the seller has a decision to make, yes or no. But the seller absolutely has a right to say, I'll accept this if you do that. And the buyer has a right to say, I'm not doing that, or okay. When I dug a little further, I asked them some more questions in that scenario to say, okay, did you ask the listing agent what the reason behind that was, right? So again, as buyer's agents, we need to keep asking more questions. And so when I sent the agent back, what came back was the listing agent said that because there was all this paperwork screw up as the offer was going in, and I guess the initial mortgage letter didn't have the right names on it. And so it made the listing agent and the sellers suspicious of their qualification. So they wanted, I'm sure, something more solid, and the listing agent went back and said, well, you know what, sellers, if they use my person, I at least can vouch for them, and so I think it will be okay. So I suggested a couple of things. Number one, if there was that scenario of distrust, number one, have the buyer's loan officer get on a conference call with the listing agent and the sellers and have a human conversation, or get on a Zoom call, because if you can see somebody, you're far more likely to trust them with your own 2 eyeballs than if you can't see them, right? Or if you've never even heard their voice. So I suggested they all have a conversation to see if that gave the seller some more comfort. And if not, the second suggestion I made was go back to the listing agent and say, is it okay if the buyers are pre-approved, like they're screened by your mortgage person, but the application goes in with our mortgage person? So that there's a screening process so that you can see that they really are approvable, but they'll still decide to move forward and make application with their mortgage person. So those are the 2 things that I suggested to help people through that. But what came back to me, what first came to me was, this is not right. They can't do that. And the real answer is, yeah, of course they can. Seller can ask for whatever they want. The buyer can choose then if they want to play that game or move on, right? I will tell you, in the good old days, when things started to go sideways on us in 2008, 2009, Debbie and I required that the buyers of our listings, and this of course was driven by the seller, we had the conversation with the seller who agreed, but for a while, because things were just, everyone was kind of crazed, and people weren't being approved, and it was last minute stuff, and it was, we made sure that we had someone that we knew and trusted pre-approve every single buyer before the seller said yes. They didn't have to use that person, right? But Karen got to step in and come back to me as the listing agent saying, you know what, if they were making an application with me, I think they would be fine. Or she would come back to me and say, ugh, their ratios are kind of off and their credit's kind of on the verge. I would be a little bit careful. And that was just a requirement. And did we get some pushback from buyers and buyers agents? Sure. But the sellers were confident enough in choosing the right buyer when everything was falling apart, that they were okay if it cost them a showing or a buyer.
Rick, a question. If that happened to me, where the seller wanted to do just what you said, but the seller's bank had a lousy rate that they were offering, plus they wanted points.
Yep.
So I refused, and they let me go with my own. It turned out to be Keller Mortgage, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Which was the better one. So what do? You just walk away or negotiate?
That's up to the buyer, right? I think as buyer's agents, we have to counsel the buyer. If I were representing you, Dan, in that scenario, and the terms came back and you said to me, Rick, my own mortgage person has a better rate and there's no terms. Why on earth would I pay over here? Say, great, Dan, is it okay if I take that information back and kind of issue our own ultimatum back? Take the stand that says, you really want to be the buyer for this particular property. What else can we do to have you verify our qualifications? How else can we approach this? Because if what you're saying is we need to go down this path, we're going to say no to that. And yet we'd still like to be your buyer. So what are some other opportunities that we have to make that happen, right? And now it's a conversation in order to create comfort for the sellers versus, maybe the sellers were in bed with that loan officer or that mortgage company or whatever. Maybe they were making something on the other side. Maybe who knows what the scenario is. Maybe the seller's brother-in-law was the president of the mortgage company. I don't know, right? Which I'm sure is all illegal in the land of mortgage. And yet, do people do things that they're not supposed to?
Yes.
Yes. But I think that the idea when you're faced as a buyer's agent with some sort of seeming ultimatum, I think the path that you get to go down is a conversation with your buyers and then a decision about whether you're going to offer an ultimatum back and be okay walking away. Because frankly, guys, the most power your buyers have is the power of walking away, because most sellers don't want to see your buyer walk away. And so instead, when you go back and say, so these are the terms that the buyer is okay with, I'm curious, how else can we figure this out? What other options aren't we thinking about? Like having a phone call with the buyer's mortgage people or, whatever.
Right.
That help everybody?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure thing. All right, guys, it's 2:11. We're over time. I hope this was helpful.
Where do we put the escalation clause?
Where do you put the escalation clause?
Yes.
Yeah, so it goes right with the offer. What I might do, because it's lengthy, and some of these forms don't have a real spot to write something lengthy, instead of where it says the line for the purchase price on the offer to purchase or in the purchase agreement, I might put a little asterisk and then attach the escalation clause in a separate piece of paper, right? And have the sellers, have the buyers sign the escalation clause as well as the offer. Does that help, Joanne?
Yeah, and we would note that as writers attached, or we can put in additional terms, either place.
Yeah, you could put it in other contingencies as well, although I prefer to keep that for like other stuff. I think if it was specific to the escalation clause, I would asterisk the purchase price line and have it reference the actual clause itself, and then type that out so it's clear. One last thing I'll say about the escalation clause, if I were presenting that to Lori as the listing agent, I would look to have a quick conversation with her around that. By the way, Lori, you'll note that there's an escalation clause in there, because by just me saying that to Lori on the phone or in person, I'll get an idea of how Lori's going to proceed with that. If she says, "Oh, what?" Well, then we might have to have some more conversation. If she says, "Oh, not one of those again. Those are illegal. Then we have a different conversation, right? So make sure it's not just a surprise, because they're not used every day and they're not used by everyone, and yet they are a good tool for when the circumstances are right.
Perfect. Excellent information, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, have a spectacular afternoon. We don't have a 4:30 today, so I'll see you again at 9 tomorrow morning.
Adios.